All right, it is 6:28 PM and we are beginning our city council work session. We have one item on our agenda tonight, and that is review and discussion of the Parks and Recreation capital projects, operations, and maintenance with a combination of Penn Almany, I think some of his staff, and Laura Smith. I don't know who's up first.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having us today. I did invite some of our Parks and Recreation team members and I did not incentivize it. So they're here just because they're amazing. So we're not going to ask them to stand before you, but if you do have any questions, they're obviously available to answer any of those. But yeah, we're before you to discuss the Parks and Recreation investment plan. And at the heart of it is a slide that I believe Laura's going to do a little bit of history, but it ultimately shows exactly how much we've got going on in this world.
You only get me for 3 slides tonight, so congratulations. This first one is really, what we wanted to do this evening is we're not here to talk about spending money or specific projects. One of the things that we've known for quite a while, and I think we've managed on a project by project basis pretty effectively, is all the things related to Parks and Recreation. We are at a point where we feel it's really important to start to move forward to something that's more strategic and bringing a lot of these pieces of the puzzle that we've been working on together. So tonight we just wanted to really introduce you to that, to create a little bit of a foundation, to introduce some of the tools that we're already using. And so we don't have a plan that we're going to present and say, please adopt this. But as we started thinking about it and just sort of word clouding a little bit, there's a lot that goes into our Parks and Recreation arena. We have the community center, we have the Mission Family Aquatics Center, we have all of our outdoor parks, we have trails, we have routine maintenance, we have preventative maintenance, we have large scale capital projects, we have planning and citizen survey and citizen engagement and all sorts of other things that go into that, including the variety of funding sources. So this was really just a way to visually remind us that it is kind of a complicated maze, and probably more so a lot of our other infrastructure and departments are more siloed in different categories. So next slide, please. This is you and then me. Okay. We organized that incorrectly. But
So guiding principles, these are kind of our North Star elements. These help establish a framework for how Mission Parks and Recreation approaches our future and long-term investments. First, we wanted to continue enhancing quality of life and community connection. And that's so important to us that in each of our full-time meetings, we review the mission statement, which is to foster community and individual health through gathering events, programs, and classes that connect people and improve quality of life. Right? Did I do all right? These guys grade, they grade hard. But it's important to create these spaces so that our residents feel welcomed at any opportunity. Parks and Recreation are some of the most visible ways that we can connect with each other and connect as a city. Secondly, maintenance and long-term sustainability remain priorities to our residents. Residents consistently rank maintenance and condition of amenities as one of their highest priorities across all of our surveys and all of our engagement efforts. We also want to continue improving accessibility and equitable access. It wasn't at the forefront when some of our amenities were initially built, and that's definitely a priority to us. Supporting health, wellness, and recreation opportunities also remains central to our work through our facilities, through our programs, through our aquatic amenities, trails, and outdoor spaces. And so through strategic and responsible use of limited public resources, we believe that's the best way to kind of balance all of the immediate needs before us, as well as phase planning and operational considerations in the future. So Laura.
So park investment plan. So we've talked about park master plans. We've talked about parks conceptual plans. We've talked about park CIP plans. We talk about park budgets. We talk about all of these things, which are very important technical pieces that will ultimately feed into, inform our decision in a Parks and Recreation investment plan. So again, as I said, we're not here tonight to present solutions, but really more to talk about what is planned. And it's probably easier for me to start with what the plan is not. It is not a commitment to immediate construction in anything that was included in your packet or anything that you're going to see on a slide tonight. It's not a tax proposal. It's not a detailed design for any particular park or a replacement for public input. It is a plan and a process for really evaluating the system in its entirety, helping us identify priorities, aligning investment with community goals, and creating a roadmap for future funding and capital decisions. Why do we need it? We need it because I think we have enough experience with nearly 15 years of a dedicated Parks and Recreation sales tax as we think forward to potential renewal. So what will we do between now and 2033 when the current sales tax expires? How will we identify what we need or want? And how do we prioritize those? And how do we tell the story should we make the decision to go forward to renew that dedicated revenue stream to support Parks and Recreation? And so again, the plan itself, even when we get to the point of having a plan that we would present, is not going to obligate you to any spending. The goal is to help us make better informed future funding decisions and to really focus on stewardship, fiscal planning, and community outcomes. So it's intended to move us from a more reactive project by project decision-making process towards a more long-term, transparent, and community-informed investment strategy for our Parks and Recreation infrastructure. The plan is ultimately a governance tool, and I think that's a really important way to think about this rather than simply a spending initiative. And so we want to use a plan to start asking some targeted strategic questions, such as what should we prioritize? Maintenance, expansion, both? What's that balance? How should equity, as Penn mentioned, one of our guiding principles or values, factor into those investment decisions? Should the focus be on neighborhood parks, trails, recreation facilities, or all of the above? What level of service should our residents expect? How aggressive should we be regarding future capital investment? Should sustainability and resilience be formal evaluation criteria? And a whole slew of other things that I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to develop and add to that list over time. We're really trying to shift ourselves into policy discussion mode as opposed to project spending mode. And we really just created this graphic. Again, it's a little bit simpler than the word cloud, but I think it's really central to when we think about Parks and Recreation. And this was evident when we think back to the retreat that we had on May 2nd and listening to all of you and the priorities and the differences in priorities that the 9 of you have related to Parks and Recreation. And when we expand that lens out to the broader community, how do we really use this type of document and this type of strategic approach to help get us to build a consensus around the projects and the things that we want to deliver to this community. So next slide, please. So just a little bit about our current funding scenarios. I think everybody's aware that we have a 3/8 cent dedicated Parks and Recreation sales tax. It was first approved in 2011, actually, to reconstruct the Outdoor Aquatic Center, which was 56 years old at the time we passed the sales tax, and the city had the community center and was struggling to think about how to take care of all of the Parks and Recreation resources. We knew at that time we really weren't making investments in our outdoor park system. We were sort of maintaining some of the things that we had. And there was a task force at the time that actually recommended and came forward and made a recommendation to the council for a 1/4 cent sales tax. And I will never forget that Councilmember Pat Quinn said, hey, I've been sitting up here at the dais and I'm hearing about all of these other needs and deferred maintenance and things that we have. We have an opportunity to look at a bigger picture than replacing the outdoor pool. And so ultimately, we went back and worked through the process and came back with a recommendation to put before voters in 2011 the 3/8 cent Parks and Recreation sales tax. It passed with about 54, a little more than 54% approval, driven largely by the Mission Marlins swim team going out and advocating and promoting for the park. And about 60% or so of the revenues for that first 10 years. So a dedicated sales tax we're only allowed to put that in place for a 10-year period before it sunsets. And then we have to go ask voters for renewal. So we can't have it in perpetuity like our general sales tax. And so successful, 60% of that allowed us to the next priority that was identified really allowed us to start catching up on a lot of deferred maintenance at the community center, because that was something else that was competing for general fund dollars. Then the sales tax language was written both for operations and capital. Again, so that sales tax expired in March of 2022. Yes, 2022. No, 2023. The street sales tax and the Parks and Recreation sales tax came back to back. And so we actually went out again, had the conversation, looked at what did we want to renew at that 3/8 cent level? Did we want to look at reducing that back based on the needs? And really at the time we had been through some conceptual park planning processes, and the focus shifted at that point when we looked at the renewal to investments in our outdoor park system. So when we renewed and took that forward to the voters in 2022, we got 88% approval. I think part of that was the work that they'd seen that had been happening. And I think we were able to tell the story about what our intent was and how we wanted to spend the dollars that would be entrusted to us in the next 10-year period. That 3/8 cent sales tax generates about $1.2 million a year at this point, can be used for operations and capital, and it will sunset in March of 2023. So we will need to be talking about 2033, and we should be thinking about renewing no later than November of 2032. We also have special parks funding, and that is a third of the state gas tax revenue. So it's actually alcohol funding. My apologies. So a third of the alcohol funds go into the general fund, a third goes to the special alcohol fund, and has to be used for prevention and treatment of a variety of different things, and then a third into special Parks and Recreation. So I will update this PowerPoint. That currently generates about $150,000 a year. We've used the lion's share of that to pay leases on our cardio equipment at the community center, and then a few miscellaneous projects here and there. When we look at general fund revenues, which also support our Parks and Recreation operations in 2026, between the community center and the outdoor aquatic center, their budgets total about $3.4 million. We have a specific cost recovery strategy, which Penn will cover here in just a moment, but our anticipated cost recovery for the community center for 2026 is about 61%. It's been trending upwards since the pandemic. But what that translates to in terms of dollars is about $1.5 million of general fund revenues that go to subsidize. So percentages are important, but it's also important to look at what that is in actual dollars and cents. And then in the last 10 years, we've been able, on the Parks and Recreation side, to secure a little over $850,000 in various grants to fund a variety of things. So that's kind of what we have and how we pay for Parks and Recreation, which is an important foundational piece when we think about how do we begin to balance and prioritize. Next slide, please.
So we've largely caught up on deferred maintenance items at the Powell Community Center, but several major capital improvement items are outstanding. Some of the largest future projects include a roof replacement And the reason that number is 800,000 to 1.25 million is because there's a consideration to potentially include solar along with that. And so we're in the midst of gathering details to see structurally if that's even feasible, and then we'll be before you to discuss alternatives when that decision's before us. But the HVAC system has several air handlers that need replaced, and the locker room modernization that came as a result of Tran and Thomas's space use analysis. So these require long-term funding strategy and phased implementation just because of the sheer size of these dollars.
I'm gonna interject right there. So we included a lot of pages from a Tran and Thomas study that we did in your packet. And there are a lot of pretty pictures. One of the things that we realized with staff turnover and the age of the facility and some of the recommendations out of the feasibility study was it would benefit us tremendously to work with a professional designers to think about how to maintain and create a cohesive approach to those public spaces in the facility. We've done a lot of upgrades. North and south restrooms have been updated, other places in the facility, but as we look at some of the bigger picture items, we wanted to think about how would we do that phased. Obviously, we can't afford all of that at once. But we wanted to just start to get a feel and a flavor for what that might look like. And when the time is right and we're ready to bring forward one of those projects, we'll be happy to share more detail and get specific feedback about what you like and don't like about materials or look and feel of that. But they worked with staff and they toured other community centers and really looked at what's out there, what would keep us competitive with other community centers throughout the metro. And really keep that investment that we've made in that building, something that could continue to help move us in the direction of the cost recovery goals that have been set by the council.
Mhm.
So I didn't want to not touch on that. So if anybody has a specific comment about any of the Tran and Thomas piece, gave you a lot of background information in the packet. If you wanted to read it, it's there to really help, again, create some context and foundation for you all.
Yeah, and as part of their deliverable, they really leaned into the fact that anytime you make investment in amenities, citizens show up to support it. We've seen that time and time again in Mohawk, Waterworks Park, some of our newer programs and in spaces that we've actually revitalized. That's come to fruition. So the study, just like Laura had mentioned, focuses on improving space utilization, user experience, and operational efficiencies. And that's at the heart of that is balancing our current amenities with some of those longer term impacts and with an eye focused on decreasing the cost recovery number to the general fund is, right now supporting the community center. So next slide. Between 21 and 2023, the city completed a business plan analysis for the community center to try to better understand operations and the financial sustainability of the community center and department operatings. One major outcome was making sure that we clearly outlined a cost recovery goal for the department. And so that cost recovery target is between 70 and 80%. And like Laura had mentioned earlier, we've seen that trend from 33% all the way up to last year's 61%. And so, yes, Sam.
Yes, sir.
How is that cost recovery number established? Are there experts smarter than I who recommend that, or was that an internal number?
So that's based off of Parks and Recreation standards and the input from the professionals that did that study. So they recommended 70%, and we've tried to err on, let's not be limited by 70% and try to shoot higher than that.
Thank you.
You bet.
And Laura or Penn, it could be maybe helpful since we have some newer council members, if we could also send around a link or a copy of that feasibility study.
Do we have a list of all the things where we get revenue back to the city? Whether it be fees,
Yes,
Well, you know, a
Ye-
whole variety of things. There's a multitude of things we get money back for. And
absolutely.
that's factored into how you're gonna meet your goal on your cost recovery. I just wondered, would you, in moving that direction, would you be like going up in cost? Would you, how would those spread out?
Yeah, so there's an art form to that. And, we've tried to embrace that through surveys to feel what the threshold is on pricing for our residents. And you may have seen those in the past. We've adjusted community center pricing. We've adjusted program pricing. Realizing that price is a signal of value. We don't want to be necessarily the low cost option just to be a low cost option. And which is why we kind of have the price point set where it is and then offer the scholarship for those that have financial needs. But yeah, our budget's set up so that every one of our programs ties into a line item so we can keep track of the revenues associated with it.
Thank you.
You bet.
And you're also classifying, one of the things the feasibility study did is you're classifying the types of programs that you're offering. So some you offer never intending to break even, and others, depending on who you're serving, you range from 0% cost recovery to 100% cost recovery over that range. That it's kind of a pyramid. And when we send that link out, that's a kind of an interesting piece of the feasibility study.
Yeah, we also had the follow-ups on like space pricing and stuff, right? That categorized based on those.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sam, do you have another question? No, okay.
Yeah, one of the pieces that came out of that was a revenue policy, and in there, like Laura had referenced, we have different program based off of, community impact. If it's a need, like we want everyone to learn how to swim, then those are priced at lower price points than say something like teaching somebody how to cook sourdough, right? And there's really a 100% cost recovery on a program like that versus something that has far-reaching benefit to the community. So things that we've completed to date, space use analysis, we've KPI for data collection to further educate our decision-making process. We've adjusted rental rates. We've increased programming opportunities. We've hired a business manager and improved marketing and visibility efforts. And so we're committed to a sustainable and data-informed operating system that's intended to improve our user experience and make sure that we only increase community value. Next slide. So key findings in Net Promoter Score. Some of you may have heard of NPS before, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But we just completed a patron survey in January 26 to kind of gauge what the pulse was among community center residents. And it provided valuable insights into some of our strengths and also opportunities for improvement. So we've leaned into the improvements first, and then we'll end with the strengths. One key takeaway is that adult and family memberships represent the highest retention opportunity moving forward. And we've seen with our family and adult memberships that they have a myriad of opportunity costs before them. And sometimes those are competing interests and we lose out if we don't have enough value in their lives. They want to take that trip, they want to participate in something else, go to a World Cup game, there goes the community center membership. So another important finding was that feeling valued and connected is the strongest predictor of member loyalty. And so in everything we do, we try to focus on treating our patrons with respect. And we've seen that as a strength on kind of the backside of the Powell Community Center staff. The survey also identified aquatics reliability pinch points. Things like hot tub closures, lap lane availability, and unexpected pool disruptions continue to impact user perception and trust in our facility. So kind of a sub point of that is maintenance elements. Anytime something goes wrong in the locker room or in the aquatics area, those patrons remember, and it's almost like another gut punch when it happens within a certain threshold of time, right? And so our struggle is to try to meet those maintenance needs as frequently, and then make sure that we're communicating it so that they don't feel like this is an unheard or unresolved solution that's just no one's paying attention to. So, next slide. Coming out of this survey, we had a net promoter score of 46. And so just in context, 0 is positive. So you have survey feedback, and those that score a 9 or a 10 in value are called your promoters. Those that score in the 7 or 8 range are kind of ambivalent. They don't really get scored. And then those that are in the 1 to 5 to 6 range are your detractors. And so you take your promoters, subtract the detractors, and that's how you get your net promoter score. And so for reference, Disney's world-class amenity, theme parks, those types of businesses, they hover in that 50 to 60 range. So the fact that we're on the cusp of 50 really speaks volumes about how many people truly love and appreciate and value the Powell Community Center. And so, yes.
So tell me how many are in your survey?
I don't have, yeah, it was 240. So enough to be statistically relevant.
Say again,
It was enough to be statistically relevant
statistically
Relevant.
relevant.
or representative of the larger membership population. Yeah.
Okay, and so your population of users is what?
So if you factor in, we've got about 4,000 insurance members and 2,000 membership holders that pay.
200 was statistically significant.
Yeah. So, I mean, leaning into some additional feedback coming off the heels of that, residents consistently highlighted the variety of programs and offered throughout the facility as a bonus. They loved that our staff is helpful and friendly. They called us out, and it's important to remember that these are unprompted. We just said, where do you find value? We didn't say, do you love our team members? And then they said, oh yes, we love your team members. Sorry, Jenny. Amenities and equipment continue to be viewed positively overall, and it's helpful that we have this lease program where we refresh the cardio equipment every 3 years, and that within the community that uses that, they really see significant value. Cleanliness and maintenance also continue to receive positive feedback, especially considering the age of our facility and how much use we get during the high use periods. So overall, we've got a really solid foundation, and we've shown that we have strong community value and strong resident loyalty. There's still opportunities for us to kind of lean into ways to improve that.
I want to just detour briefly. So in your packet was the executive summary from the survey. There was a link in the packet if you really want to read all 21 pages of the survey. It was I thought it was fascinating, and I told Brian, Lorette, and Penn that I was really enjoyed kind of reading through it. Very well done. I want to go back because I know Councilmember Vaughn, you typically will have a question for us about the number of respondents to a survey, and we would always like to have more. I'm not sure it's fair to say this was a statistically valid survey based on the number of respondents that we had, but a sample size. So we are in the infant stages coming out of this feasibility study of we've never really done surveying of this type and analysis of these kinds of survey results. So our hope would always be to continue to get better at that. But I think there's some really interesting things that we can take away from and learn and build on through this survey process.
I think that what you've done is you've got a qualitative study, which which is fine, but you're in, I'm not sure, 206,000. That seems like a big difference because you're telling me you have 6,000 members, correct?
Yes,
And
but
200 of them were surveyed.
yeah.
Yeah.
4,000. Yeah,
Pardon?
4,000 of whom are
Chose to respond to the survey.
1,000, did you say?
200.
They chose to respond to the
Oh.
survey. So the survey went to a broader group, and that was the response rate that we received from the distribution of that.
Okay, thank you.
And 4,000 of those members are insurance members who don't pay anything out of pocket to come to our facility.
In
and
which case, if you're looking then primarily at the 2,000 who are paying, that is statistically significant because that threshold is 10%, right?
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, which factored into it. Because I mean, there's a pretty significant number who just automatically renew their insurance membership each year and don't use the facility. Because you can do it for free and then they'll do it for the 6 regional community centers. Next slide. So in 2025, the MFAC achieved 50.4% cost recovery, which raises an important discussion opportunity for us on the long-term operational expectations and sustainability, and whether or not 50% is the right cost recovery standard. Historically, we've been in that 50 to 60% range since I've been here in Mission. At the same time, the facility is 12 years old and larger maintenance needs are beginning to emerge. Things like bathhouse upgrades, the locker room is all exposed to the outdoors. And so considerations of potentially just closing that envelope and addressing the hydrostatic pressure that has cracked the lap lane pool and continues to be one of those maintenance concerns on our radar. There's also growing interest on evaluating increasing some of the amenities and improving some of the look and feel of those amenities so that we're competitive within the region and so that we can respond to some of the needs of some of our patrons. We're part of a pool. What's the
Super Pool Pass.
Super Pool Pass. Yeah, we're part of the Super Pool Pass program, which allows you to purchase a membership. And when you purchase a membership, you can also buy a Pool Pass membership, which gives you access to some of the regional pools around us. And so when they do that, they're immediately comparing our facilities with the neighboring facilities. And we'll occasionally get feedback that, hey, have you thought about doing this or this? So there's real conversations about balancing the operational sustainability and maintenance planning with some of our future investment at the Mission Family Aquatic Center.
As a point of reference, at the time that we looked at reconstructing the pool, it was operating at about below 25% cost recovery. So you're probably never going to get to 100% cost recovery for a facility that is open 3 months out of the year. But part of that, again, is that something that a longer term operational strategy, is that something that we want to do? The other thing, and I didn't mention it when we kind of talked on one of the big ticket items for the community center, but as we think about restroom and locker room upgrades and at the community center, at the MFAC, I think we have some legislation and some things that have changed in this last year that certainly need to be factored in or could influence our decisions in terms of the way those facilities should be or need to be constructed to best serve our residents in the most inclusive and safe fashion. So again, that's something that we will factor into, kind of gets to some of that equity, some of those equity issues, I think, in our planning processes.
When you have that major pool pass, what is it called?
Super Pool Pass?
Yeah, the super pool pass. How much do we get from that? Do we get a portion of that?
Yeah, so it's based off of attendance at each of the facilities. So there's an administrative cost, and then the rest of it's broken down into how many times they attended Roland Park versus Mission versus Prairie Village.
I would say we get somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000 a year from that's returned to us through that program.
Because we keep track of that? Is
Yeah.
that how
We do, yeah.
Mm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Next slide. So I have this as me, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Trails and connectivity continue to rank as the highest priority across resident surveys and community engagement efforts. The city's already completed recommendations identified through the Rock Creek Corridor Studies 1 and 2, and nothing has currently been budgeted. So that those costs are not part of the Parks and Recreation Capital Improvement Plan at this point. This creates an opportunity for us to evaluate connectivity improvements, including pedestrian access, trail enhancements, neighborhood connections, and how projects like the Mission Market may combine into our larger park system vision. So these pieces strike at the heart of our conversation tonight, and it really comes down to what's the right balance of new opportunities with funding constraints, considering all of the maintenance and operation impacts and some of the needs with modernizing our facilities, right? So next slide. Over the last 5 years, Mission has invested approximately $5.3 million into park improvements throughout the community. The city has also revived conceptual park planning around those 3 parks, Broadmoor, Anderson, and Streamway, to better align future use and vision. Another major focus moving forward is ensuring that the park's master plan is relevant and helps us kind of direct our efforts towards a singular focus. A consistent theme throughout planning efforts has been finding that right balance responsibly. So with that, we'll move to the next slide.
So one of the things I want to come back to this kind of this visual, and I've been thinking about this a lot coming out of the retreat and Post-it notes and dot exercises and all of those kinds of things. And so I envision this almost because I almost want to blow this up and put it on the wall and give you all a bunch of dots and say, you have X number of dots to spend, go put them on the circle that is most important to you, right? And you would have, we're going to be outdoor park heavy and we're going to be trail heavy with this group. And so starting to think about what processes can we put in place to engage in those conversations to sort those things out, because you saw some price tags on some of the larger ticket items. The roof at the community center, it's improved in the last 18 months, but in the last couple of years, we frequently move buckets and things around in the building. So the roof conversation at the community center is not one that can be deferred or delayed for particularly a much longer period of time. So there are some things that are competing that are going to bump up against some of the shinier, more forward facing, more interesting things that we want to do and that we want to provide to the residents of our community. So before we kind of close, and Penn closes with kind of our goals and objectives, and we can do it after that or now, we really just wanted to sort of introduce some of these things and start a little bit of a conversation this evening about, how you think about this, how you approach it, what you would like to see us bring you or help in the evaluation and the balancing of the competing interests and the projects that we might have. So why don't I let Penn go ahead and just kind of close with goals and objectives, and then we'll kind of come back to just a dialogue around those other pieces.
So we've made meaningful progress in aligning our priorities with you as the council and with our residents through our efforts and surveys. We'll continue to do that through expanded engagement, and we'll continue to lean into strategic partnerships. Well, we need to place continuous focus on improving connectivity, accessibility, park experiences, and organization resilience, which we haven't really gotten into that much tonight, but things like succession plan and redundancies in terms of losing institutional knowledge and making sure that we have retention efforts in place to keep all of the time and effort that we've invested in our team. And we want to do that through cost recovery strategies and phased implementation. planning. So this approach moves us beyond just the short-term project thinking that was part of that initial master plan and kind of gets us to that overall park investment plan mindset. And I'm excited to be a part of that because when you're in the investment plan mindset, nothing rocks the boat because it's kind of overarching and you can plug in pieces and certain things will trickle down based off of the weights that we sort of assign to them. So ultimately, the goal is to continue evolving Mission Parks and Recreation into a more responsive, more resilient, community-centered system that reflects on the priorities and needs of our residents for the long term. Because I believe my vision, and I believe our team is in lockstep, is we want to make sure that we're impacting lives so that every member of our city can look and say, you know what, you guys thought about me, I belong here, and I feel it each time I come to this activity or each time I come to this amenity. And with that, happy to answer.
And one more thing that I would say, just to touch on kind of the tools that we have. We've talked about some of those tools. There are a couple of places where Penn referenced Direction Finder residents' thoughts through Direction Finder survey about Parks and Recreation amenities. We have conceptual park planning processes, which have been very forward facing. We've had our Rock Creek corridor studies, which have had a lot of public engagement and involvement. We're starting to do more in terms of member surveying at the community center and other places. So there are a lot of tools that will be available to us, including before the end of the year, the Direction Finder survey tool. But I think part of why we wanted to have this conversation was to help think about the specific questions that we want to ask our residents, right? We don't want to just throw it open, knowing we wanted to create some of that foundation. Where might our challenges, will we have some balancing that needs to occur so that we can manage resident expectations through the survey questions that we design. So happy to open it up there. I don't know where your
Yeah,
questions is.
questions? Comments, questions? Yeah, Debbie, then Ben.
Just a quick comment. One of the questions I think would be prudent for us to understand is a caveat kind of to what's going on. If you have people from out of town that come in, would you be proud to take them into this facility and why? And maybe market things on a more positive. Sometimes if you ask people, what do you like? What do you not like? You get the naysayers and then we don't really get to go forward with the people that are okay with it or have suggestions on how to make it even better. So I think bringing somebody that's not from here into that facility, what would they say? Have they been to a bigger facility or have they been somewhere they could kind of recreate in their mind what was good and how accessible the staff was and the rooms and things like that?
Ben?
Okay, well, I have a lot of thoughts, but let's start. I think the one that from the top is the most key to me is, Penn, you mentioned getting into this investment mindset. And I think that's where I see us strengthening in a lot of areas as a city across departments is sort of evolving from these sort of spot fixes and projects and fits and starts and, figure out what needs done basically whenever we're ready to do something else into programs. We're seeing programs of investment and maintenance across, and those evolve every year from my point of view, and getting to the place where we're expecting to, put a certain amount of investment into the various systems and departments and facilities. It gives us, I think, the right mindset that we should be investing in these things and what to expect year to year on what those expenditures are going to look like. But it also, I think, again, we've shown this I think across all the departments really, that when we have that mindset, we start thinking about everything turns into sort of a very well considered kind of capital plan, right? It's not just, wait until something's broken and then maybe fix it, maybe upgrade it, but there's a vision, and it's easier to contextualize how those investments, need to happen, or how they should be prioritized. And especially for sitting up here and getting things an hour at a time, every couple of weeks, I think it really, it just sort of, it means that there's there's a vision out there and a program out there that we can always keep in mind and look at. And I think it's just healthy for the organization. So I appreciate the work you're doing on this front, in that vein. And I think that, again, has been happening in a lot of areas, and I think it's really healthy for us. When I think of kind of what are the priorities for the limited funds, I do think that the community center is a pretty critical asset, and we sort of do have to, can't really have like a half a community center or a half working community center, right? So we either commit or don't commit. And I think on balance, the community center is pretty important across a variety of different aspects. So yeah, when we look at the graphic with the 4 areas and how do we want to spread the money around, there may be a lot of trails and outdoor parks enthusiasm here, but I don't think any of us would sort of spite the community center for those things in any way, or at least I wouldn't. And I guess while I've got the microphone, thinking back to the PCC designs, kind of concept stuff in particular, and especially thinking about some of the stuff in the feasibility study and the other materials about difficulty retaining families and children and things like that. I think we're pretty constrained on like family changing areas and, how to get in and out of the pool with, and, I think about the one family changing room in the pool area. I mean, it's kind of huge, right? You could probably fit 2 of the ones you see at Miriam in that space. And, you go in there at the right time. There's a lot of families in there doing swimming lessons or what have you. So, just since I'm, in that demographic and that was one that we called out as part of the feasibility study and the follow-on report. That is it makes it hard to, get through the locker room and the pool and get in and out with family. So that's just the one thing that I didn't see addressed in that Tran and Thomas design. Everything else in there, I thought, all the fancy pictures aside, it was thoughtful architecture and thoughtful like focus on, wow, they really did think about how this space isn't working now and could work better. But the sort of family changing room, locker room thing, I thought that's the one place where I really feel like we're lacking that matches up with the feasibility study's findings that wasn't addressed.
There was, what's that?
3
4.
family change.
Yeah. So in there was one slide. It's
Yeah.
pretty easy to go skip over it, but they recommended revamping the 2 locker rooms
Mhm.
and adding 4 individual family change rooms, 2 on the women's side and 2 on the.
Okay. I was probably reading the plan wrong then. Yeah.
I missed it
'Cause-
in
Yeah.
reviewing
I
it.
did look for it and I
Yeah.
missed it. So
It doesn't mean that we couldn't or shouldn't have more, that they're in the right place, but that definitely was an element that they brought forward in their analysis and review and discussions with us.
yeah, and just as a larger theme, kind of navigating the community center with kids, like to get to the pool, if you want to take your whole family, you basically go from the north entrance all the way around to the side door,
Mhm.
split up and drag everybody through the locker room or what are you going to do? Pick your battle. So
Risk the locker room. Yeah.
I want to follow up as a member of the Parks and Trails crew also. Unsurprisingly, I'm very excited to see the operational and organizational resilience part of the goals here, partially because it is a thing that it results in a more sustainable experience overall for the city and staff and all of our residents, but also because there were 2 different spots in the unprompted responses that said that belonging was important, feeling valued as a person was important, but then also that the staff was friendly and helpful. Like those elements get really brittle when we don't have long-term planning to keep that knowledge in the group of people that we have and the group of people that are coming. And I know that we frequently have like, this is the special binder of everything that came out of this person's brain, which is always perfect and great in terms of emergencies. But we also want all of our single-brained people to be able to take breaks without feeling like, as a result, we're going to lose things in this particular instance, the community center. But I also do know that that's like a really long road. Figuring out organizational resilience, like knowing what to do isn't the same as having the time to get it done. And so on all of these things, which all of us are going to rate number one priority at some point or another, I do really think that that's a really high priority thing for all of us, especially since there were unprompted responses that focus on that and the community center's role as a third space, which we are losing across all of our communities, especially small local ones like Mission. So.
Yeah. Yeah, for reference, 25% of the qualitative feedback referenced the friendly and helpful staff at the community center. Mhm.
I have a couple of maybe half-baked ideas here, and I'm sure the first one is already on you and Brian's radar, but that would be, I thought the study was interesting and sort of the tension between the dedicated users and who that population, and then who we would need to add, kind of the comments that Ben is making, for the long-term success of the facility. And I think a big part of this planning process will be, sort of what sort of risks do we want to take? You can't be all things to all people. And so how do you balance that sort of sustained, 4,000 insurance members versus attracting maybe more members of our community, because we have a lot of residents outside of Mission that come, I think, from that population. I mean, from both groups, but from that population especially. And, we are subsidizing this as a community. So how do we make it, attractive to everyone in our community? But I think, you're going to risk upsetting perhaps some of those long-term users in an attempt to make the facility more balanced. So I just wanted to flag that as I'm sure that challenge is already front of mind, but it was something else I was thinking of as I read this. And then my other point was just on the outdoor parks, because I know we're talking about thinking about things holistically, and I think that is right. But I do think we need to keep in mind that we went into the sales tax renewal talking about a commitment to improving all of our outdoor parks. And, that might look different than the first version of the conceptual plans, but, just keeping that in mind, especially as we're looking to that renewal, because I think part of why we were so successful in both the streets and parks renewals last time is because we were able to clearly demonstrate, sort of, here's what we told you we would do, and here's what we did. And I think if we get to the end of the period and we still have multiple parks that we sort of haven't touched at all, that could be a concern in getting that renewal.
Thank you.
And I think really, I mean, Broadmoor, we put the new trail.
Right.
And that was
Exactly, yeah.
probably through the conceptual park planning process. That was probably our park that had the least amount of agreement and consensus about what
Right.
should be there and how it should be changed. So that's definitely one that should be revisited. I think part of our hope in hosting the market there for this next season is to introduce people and users to Broadmoor Park that maybe don't typically spend time there, and solicit. I think there's some opportunities to get some feedback and think about how we might be able to use that. If we have a block project that moves forward, you're bringing new residents there. So I think there's some opportunities there. Anderson Park, we have done the tennis courts. The pool is obviously the first piece of that. There's a play structure and some shelters and things there that I think we need to come back and revisit that are more. Part of that park is we have used land and water conservation grant funds over the years for the original construction of the pool and for the not the tennis courts. But what that does is that puts us on a list. And so we have to get approval anytime we want to add something, modify something, move something in that park. So there's a little bit of we don't have the ability just sort of carte blanche to go in and move everything around the way that we would want to do it. But I think that there's some definite upgrades and improvements that could be made there. Probably relatively on the scale of affordability could be done. We're not looking at a $4 million overhaul like we've done in Mohawk or some of the other places. Then that leaves Streamway. And I think there are a lot of questions to be resolved around Streamway and where does that priority in terms of the amount of investment fall on a property that we don't actually own. That's KDOT right of way. And I know we've had some conversations over the last year or so from some in the community about some other amenities and some grant opportunities, and we'll continue to explore that. And I think it's a hidden gem. I think Councilmember Chosy, in your council questions earlier this year, pointed that out as one of the best kept secrets in Mission. So I think there's some advantages there, but I think what we have left, absolutely hear what you're saying, Mayor, but I think we have some opportunities to do all of those things. And we have time at this point in the conversation before we get to renewal. We don't want to be thinking about those things 12 months out from renewal of the sales. tax.
Yeah, that's what I was just kind of trying to flag is that, if we get to that point and we do decide, because again, not deciding here tonight that we're even going to try to renew that, but
Correct.
assuming that we do, move in that direction, then, sort of laying the groundwork of delivering on what we promised
Yep.
and just delivering on what we promised for the sake of delivering on what we promised as
Exactly.
well. But yeah, Debbie?
Are we off the board with the dog park now? I mean, we were up, we were down, we were all over the place with the dog park. Where are we with that?
There's been enough investment with some of the apartment complexes that I believe we've hit the threshold for a community our size. So
Potentially.
potentially, I
The
mean, there's-
birthday wish cards that we've had at some of our events, our dog park is surfacing again.
it's a very,
little bit.
it's a very vocal
Yeah.
user group. And so I don't know that that's ever going to go away, but it's always going to be, does a community of 10,000 bear the weight of a larger region of dog owners? And so that's going to be, one of our consideration points.
Do we have any other comments or questions tonight? Yeah. Ben? Or sorry, Dr.
Yeah, you have something down there? Go ahead.
Wanda, did you have a hand up? Or-
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
you go, and then we'll come back to you. Yep.
Okay, I just have a couple of questions. We got that folder about the variety grant. Are we thinking, and I thought Children's Mercy had a grant too that we could use to improve ADA on our parks. Are we thinking about applying for that or?
So we applied for Mohawk, we applied for the Game Time grant and we got 216,000 through that program. And so, yes, one of the nice pieces of any playground is there's usually grant funds out there and they're different price points depending on which manufacturer you go with. Some of the drawbacks are that you have to use a specific manufacturer when you accept Variety KC's dollars. And so there's always some sort of hoop that you have to jump through, but we consider that as part of every project. Yeah.
Okay, and then the second thing is, how many private parks are there in Mission?
Private, as in like pocket parks that we don't publicize?
Or do you mean like the parks that some of the apartments have put together for dog parks or things like that?
I mean, both. I mean the parks that are not city parks,
Mm,
but the parks that are with the apartments, the parks that are with housing divisions. How
Yeah.
many are there?
Ooh, I don't know how many apartment parks there are, but we've got 10 that we lean in to, and then there's a
The
couple
10 that I didn't hear I heard you say 10 and I didn't hear.
we lean into, meaning we put investments into to keep them presentable and safe.
Meaning city parks,
City
Yes,
parks?
City parks.
Yes,
10 city parks.
10 city parks.
You don't know about the private and the,
No.
I don't think we have many, and if we do, I'm not sure. I would call them probably could be categorized as token green spaces in development, token green spaces as opposed to,
what
A
is the
specific
definition
park.
between a token green?
well, if you think about the locale, so if you're familiar with the locale, for example, the locale, which is the building that is just to the north of the community center.
Yeah,
So they have a small dog run area. They label it as a dog park in the back, and there's one on the west side of the building. And then their outdoor amenities are not green space, they're rooftop amenities with the pool and the barbecue grills and other things like that. Very similarly, at the lanes, they have a small dog park area, and then they have a little square of fitness equipment we were talking about it the other night. And that's the extent of kind of the green space that would be available. So they're more focused and when we were talking about impacts of development on the community last week or I don't remember, 2 weeks ago. But one of the things when we talked about the impacts on parks and recreation is that can be one of our biggest, most immediate impacts because you're bringing people who don't have access to that green space. They don't have a backyard. They don't have a front yard. And so they are coming out on your trails or they're coming to your parks more so than some of the other impacts that are more cumulative, whether that be from a public works perspective or a police perspective. Part of the challenge we have is we don't have the opportunity to negotiate. Oftentimes, like if you're negotiating a subdivision development, you could have the developer dedicate a certain amount of green space or area in, for a park. We don't have that coming in. And with kind of the density and the other things that we're looking at, there's just not a lot of opportunity to create that green space. But we need to be thoughtful about that. And, as we think about, we designated land that wasn't designated parkland along the Rock Creek Trail several years ago when we sold as part of the, negotiations to sell Beverly Park to Millhouse. So we gave up that acreage, but we actually gained almost doubled the dedicated park acreage and green space that we'll ultimately have in and around the Rock Creek Trail. So we have to be creative, I think, a little bit just because of our size in adding that green space.
Ben, did you have another comment? Then we'll go Brian.
Yeah, I think speaking of trails and like where we want to invest along the trails, I think it's probably not shocking that I think the area in and around the market site is where to focus on that. The other big thing that comes to mind for trails, and it comes to mind for a lot of other parts of our parks as well, is something that I think was called out a couple of times, and that's connectivity. I think trails and parks both benefit greatly from like network effects, right? So if you think about how people get exposed to parks in other parts of Johnson County, a lot of it is that the Tomahawk Creek Trail and the Indian Creek Trail, they cut across communities and go for miles and miles, and we don't have that luxury. So I think that's kind of an underrated maybe blind spot for us in terms of, there's the Turkey Creek Trail on the north side of Overland Park that sort of has hints of maybe wanting to come to Mission one day, right? If it ever became feasible. And that's pretty much going to run smack into the side of Streamway Park. So you think about connectivity and how it can help us. I think that's huge. And zoom in, you can say the same thing about the entire Rock Creek Trail in all directions, but zooming into the parks, like if there was we've talked about a bridge from Anderson Park and like a northern kind of connection to the rest of the city, but a connection to the south from Broadmoor Park to pick up footfall that direction. It's just, not huge investments necessarily, but just connections. They draw people in, and those network effects I think are real. Just two other quick things I wanted to hit on. One, we talk about demographics and sort of the young adults, 20s, 30s, 40s, not families, not seniors, that kind of thing that came out of the feasibility study. And I'm thinking about, boy, we put up the Lanes apartments and all of a sudden I'm just inundated with young, fitness forward, professional people walking their dogs and running and jogging. And that's all they do. We're adding phase 2, right? We're adding Encore. You've got the locale like breathing down our neck here at, next to the Powell Center. And oh, by the way, Millhouse on your front step, right? Mm-hmm. That I think as much as the feasibility study and the packets tonight kind of emphasize how do we engage some of the kind of younger adult crowd, I think maybe it still isn't saying it loudly enough. I think there's a huge market there that we could probably, of all those people that want a place to go work out and want to be able to get classes that speak to their needs and desires and maybe don't want to pay to go to the sweat lab or whatever, right? Like, I think there's a huge market there and we're right to look at that, but maybe even more strongly than we've said so far. And my last thing, Mohawk Park especially, and a couple of the other more built up parks like Broadmoor and Waterworks, I think would benefit from Wi-Fi. Mohawk is a horrible place for cell phone reception, first of all, but it doesn't have to be Wi-Fi even. It could just, a cell, small micro cell or something. So
we do have Wi-Fi at Broadmoor.
Yeah.
And we're changing providers for Mohawk and Waterworks. So those should be online Wi-Fi here in the next month.
Okay. I was going to say, I didn't see the last time I was there. I looked for it. So, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
You bet.
Brian, do you have something then Cheryl?
I did. Ben actually ended up covering most of it. So as I'm reading through the study a little bit more here, I think my major note is that while I agree the survey was statistically significant, it doesn't seem to be necessarily representative of the audience where we know we need to expand to grow. And I think they note that here, which as a consultant myself, I'm always like hypercritical of other consultants. It's just in my nature. But I think they did a good job of calling that out, that we know we need to grow with the younger adult and family memberships. What they call out are reasons that group cited that they weren't using the facility. And I would really love to see some effort put into what is the key differentiator for the facility that would get them? Like, here are all the reasons they're citing they don't do it. Well, what is it that would actually get them in the door then? I know research is not cheap. I know it's expensive and time consuming. But that seems to be the piece from here that's missing for me.
And I think I didn't turn around to see who all is here, but I think our consultant might be sitting in the room.
Yes, is actually part of staff, right?
Yes.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
if those of you who haven't met Brian Lorette, who I think is sitting behind me somewhere.
Yes.
No,
I insert-
I'm looking through it because I do this too. And I'm like, okay, what can I pick at? Not a lot. Like, I think it's great. That's just the one thing that I would really love to see as an outcome is, what specifically, how can we position this with that audience so that they would say, yeah, this is delivering something to me that none of the other facilities can. Yeah.
Cheryl?
Well, in addition to the, facilities at apartments that we're now facing, we have CrossFit, we have all kinds of workout places here, Planet Fitness. And so it has become a more of a senior group that's at the Powell Center. And I get that. And they talk about that creates their community and they feel safe there because they don't have to mess with something new all the time and all that. What I would say is, let's not forget the summer camp. Every year in my neighborhood, I hear, can you expand the number in the summer camp? Okay. So no. But those are the kinds of things that bring in what you're talking about, is the younger folks, because we've heard here so many times, students that come in and they talk about, yeah, my mom and dad were on the swim team and now I'm on the swim team. So it's that, that transition. And in terms of research, I know that we worked with UMKC at one point in time on some research, and students are always looking for projects like something like this. So that might be an opportunity to do a summer camp. And, with UMKC, with all their different fitness and sports medicine and all that kind of programs, there might be some opportunities for collaboration, like you mentioned, some partnerships. But, overall, I think you guys are doing a fantastic job. And, as I mentioned to Penn, I heard such great things about the pool this weekend, and it creates community and everybody looks forward to it. So thank you guys for everything.
Thank you.
Cheryl sparked an idea. Maybe we could look at some sort of PCC discount for our full summer camp user group or something, because we run other promotions. So maybe if you ran a promotion in connection with the camps, that would get families thinking about, the amenity when they're there. Yeah, because camp admission is cutthroat. I hear from some of my coworkers outside of Mission trying to get in. So
I wanted to just make a comment quickly. This is somewhat a little bit of a tangent, but recently we were looking at potential new businesses that were coming to town, and the Post has done a story about, a bakery and a golf simulator coming into Mission West Shopping Center. So I was poking around a little bit more, and there's actually, because we always have this complex of how did we get scooped by the Johnson County Post, right? Well, I'll tell you how I think we got scooped on this one. And it's because KCTV, the Mission West Shopping Center managers, put out their own press release that got picked up by KCTV5. And they were touting themselves as having Mission West Shopping Center reaches full occupancy with new tenants, because they also have an autism clinic that's coming in and all of that. But I thought it was interesting, and I'm happy to share the link with anybody who wants, but why does it matter? So they had more than 20,000 square feet, and that's one of the things that we've talked about. They had 20,000 square feet of vacant space that they've been trying to fill. We can agree or disagree whether they filled in with the right tenants, but this article was citing the number of vehicles that pass by the center every day. 23,000 monthly visits to the Planet Fitness location, one of the top performing in Kansas, which I found really sort of interesting. 2 nearby high schools, adjacent Hy-Vee grocery store, add to consistent foot traffic. So a lot of the things that we talk about why are people making decisions or why are they choosing to come here were sort of reflected in that article. And and the Planet Fitness struck me because we often see that as competition, and it has been competition for the community center since about 2017. But how do we take those advantages that are bringing other things in and translate that into our own goals and objectives?
Any further comments or questions? Yeah, Wanda?
Yeah, I don't think that Planet Fitness is the only one. I mean, that Johnson Drive strip has a lot of little fitness.
Right.
Yeah, and aerobic, yeah, they do. So
Yeah.
it's not just Planet Fitness. And so somehow they're meeting the need of those people that you want to attract.
Mhm.
So I don't know, but the one thing that I do have to ask about, since we are talking about FIFA, it came to my attention that it seems that I was listening to the news and they were talking about a lot of these people come thinking that they're going to camp out. Have we considered that, or do we have a plan for that? Do we have ordinances? Are we going to discourage it? Are we going to encourage it? What are we going to do?
We've discussed that as a committee here. And I believe every player at the table is represented today. And some of the feedback we've gotten regionally is that concern may have been bloated somewhat.
Overplayed. Yeah.
Yeah. There,
Correct.
yeah.
We do have a no camping in parks ordinance,
Mhm.
which we've reviewed. I think you've updated signage to make sure that that's visible. And we've talked about that from a public safety perspective as well. So I think we are prepared to handle it. But again, a lot of the things that we're hearing around much of that, whether it be estimated number of visitors or the activities of the visitors while they're here, may or may not pan out to what's been predicted or shared with us, but we're ready for it. We'll see what happens.
And we will definitely not encourage it.
Yes. And it's happening. I mean, June 9th is when,
Mhm.
I saw some teams are already arriving, so.
they are. I got an email from the restaurant in Meadowbrook Park that says they're closed for a private event for the entire month of basically June through July. And I was like, well, that's it. I know what that private event is, but that's one heck of a private event.
Yeah.
I did want to just circle back to the thought on, like, there are businesses that are cannibalizing the folks that we want to attract to the community center. And the reason I want to, that I specifically want to come back to that is not because you are wholly incorrect about it. It's just that I think that the community center won't have full overlap with those people. I think Planet Fitness serves a different clientele than the community center does. And I think that that is a thing to embrace. And that follows up to something that Mayor, you said earlier, which was like, we don't quite know what that incremental growth is for us. And that relates also to Brian, what you said, like, we don't know that we're talking to the people that we do want to bring in that would prevent them from coming to us. And we don't know if those are Planet Fitness patrons either. And so yes, I think that we have questions around like where they are going. And I think that there is a sliver that would rather come to us for whatever sorts of reasons. But I don't know that it's fair to say like Planet Fitness is taking all of our people, because I don't think they are.
If Planet Fitness people came to us, could we handle it? I don't think we could.
No, we could not.
Yeah, I think I saw Brian, your hand again, then Ben.
Yeah, I regret raising it because this is almost not worth saying. I was just going to saying, speaking of getting scooped on businesses, I went to Big Grove's grand opening on Thursday, and I regret to inform everybody it was great. So, yeah. Big Grove Brewery, that was, yeah.
Ben, did you have another comment?
Yeah, just on the idea of how does the community center overlap with the other offerings in the community? I think there's a lot the community center is and does that is not present anywhere else in the community. And I think that came through in the feasibility study and the survey and all the rest. It's, yeah, you can go get a cheap set of cardio machines and weights at Planet Fitness, but I would venture to say that's probably not why people come to the community center if that's their only reason. So.
Yeah, Sam?
Yeah, I present myself as evidence because when I graduated college, I joined Planet Fitness, and then eventually my roommates and I moved on to the
You made the right choice.
We went to the Powell Community Center, and part of that is because it is as a customer, it's a premium offering over what a place like Planet Fitness. So to Josepha's point, I don't think we really are service. Yeah, there's a little bit of an overlap. The Venn diagram does overlap, but the circles are pretty prominent. So
Yeah.
Yeah, Debbie?
Be careful what you wish for. You don't, if we get 2,000 more people joining the community center, my residents are gonna be on the phone 24/7. I can't get on any machine because we got too many
I
people here.
mean,
Just be careful of that.
Yeah.
You want other people, but not in groves of 2,000 or more coming into the community center, and the people who have been patrons for years that want to use the equipment and stuff, and they can't get in. So I'm cautious.
yeah, that's good feedback. At one point in time, we were the only offering in the community, and we did have
Yeah.
8,000 members. So yeah,
And lots of comments about they can't.
lots of comments about, hey, I can only get on in the last 30 minutes of the day. Yeah.
Yeah, Wanda?
I just have one other comment. My last comment is because I represent that 60% that uses, I don't see any problem with that. I mean, that's okay with me that you have older people using it. They come from all communities all around to come here. And that says something.
Yeah,
And maybe that's okay if we're a niche market.
absolutely.
Yeah, I do think in line with that, though, that we do need to keep in mind that we do have a communities for all ages commitment as well. And so, yeah, thinking about, I don't think we want to discourage, the population that we have. And that's why I was trying to say about that balancing is, yeah, you can't be everything to everyone. And so what can you add or focus? Maybe it's even just a marketing piece. Maybe it's already there to attract some of those other users that we need for the longevity of the facility while, keeping people, if not perfectly happy, mostly happy, who are already committed
Well,
members.
who's
Yeah.
coming behind the population that's aging out in your facility, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're not if you don't have some sort of balance in terms
Yeah.
of the demographics of your membership, at some point you will have no membership. Or
Right.
very limited membership. So. yeah.
Any final comments, questions? Yeah.
You guys are doing phenomenal. We love the staff there. Without Jenny, I can't even think of going in there and not seeing Jenny again. That would break my heart.
Yeah. Thanks.
Your activities are really, all those activities you have are really, really quite magnificent, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've leaned into it in the last year and a half. So we're happy to say the community's supporting it.
Yeah, and I do think we hear a lot, from folks who are looking to invest in Mission about our community amenities. We do want to think about things like cost recovery and being savvy about where we're investing. But I think having, that investment in our park system as a whole is significant because it's driving other investment in our community as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How
Yeah,
long
Debbie?
ago was it that you started the tree program where people could buy trees and put them in the parks? What year was that?
So we're in our third year.
That has been so uplifting for so many of our constituents. They love that. They're leaving a legacy in the park with their kids' names and stuff, and they love that.
Oh, you mean the celebration tree? So that was before my time. That was in place. I thought you meant the tree drive, which we've kind of leaned into at a lower cost price point. But yeah, celebration tree program's been in place probably since '04. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you all for your
Great.
time.
Yeah.
And just the opportunity to brainstorm a little bit more sometimes than what we get to with a very specific request.
All right. With that, thank you, everybody, and that concludes our work session.